Hi there, Sarah here, and in today's topic video, we're going to go through the connection and the science between your hormones, your diet, and your brain chemistry, like your neurotransmitters, for neurodivergent women. I'm not a doctor, I'm just autistic, I have ADHD, and I hyper-focus on these things when I was going through burnout, and I didn't know I was neurodivergent, and several other issues. This is a research-based video. So that means when I give you a fact, I'm going to cite it on screen here, and you're going to be able to find that either video or article that I found that information in down in the description below. You can also use the chapters down in the description to skip to different topics. So this is what we'll be covering in this video in this order. First up are the different types of hormones that you have and what they do for you. Second, how neurodivergence weighs in. Third is your menstrual cycle, the different phases, tracking, symptom tracking, and PMDD. Fourth is a man's hormones and what his cycle looks like for a neurodivergent man. Fifth is your diet, which includes food, but also alcohol and a lot of the general medications that most neurodivergent people take and how that affects everything else as well. Sixth is pregnancy. 7 is perimenopause. And at the very end, we'll just kind of wrap everything up and help you decide where to go from here. Our sex hormones affect our neurotransmitters, but your diet does as well. So don't miss that section. But let's jump right into the first section, which is a lot of the basic hormones that us ladies have. First up is good old estrogen. Estrogen gives us energy, it gives us motivation, and it also helps create and regulate dopamine. Progesterone helps to reduce anxiety, helps us to sleep, makes us a little bit more tired and subdued, and it calms our mind. Testosterone for women gives us energy, libido, cognitive function. It also helps a lot with muscle mass and bone density. We also have cortisol, which you've probably heard about. It's like a stress hormone. So this shows up when your body is under stress. If you're overworking, maybe if you just had a baby, maybe you're like chronically not getting very good sleep, whatever it is that can be stressing your body out. This is something that will raise your anxiety. Another hormone that you may not realize is melatonin. This is something, for some reason, we don't get prescribed melatonin. You can just buy it over the counter, which is not good. I have a great resource that goes over this, but basically the facts are it influences your circadian rhythm. It's not good for you to take very much of it. A lot of the stuff that we take, 5, 10 milligrams, that's way too much. It can also be a bit of a contraceptive. It's not birth control, but if you're taking a lot of melatonin and you're trying to get pregnant, this may be getting in the way of that. It's also really bad for kids to take it, even though it's widely spread that it's okay. The only exception is if you have an autistic child or teenager, there's a certain amount that you can give them that may really help. Oxytocin is called the love hormone. It has more to do with your social connection. Oxytocin can get released if you're having a positive social connection. If you have an orgasm, skin-to-skin contact, so like mother-baby, or maybe you're touching your spouse, getting a massage, that sort of a thing. So this plays a role in bonding, whether it's a romantic or like one with your kids or friends. And it also reduces stress. A really interesting fact about oxytocin is that for both men and women, you may require a certain amount of oxytocin to be released into your system before you're actually interested in sexual activity. So all this to say in regards to your hormones, if you are taking a birth control of any form, that can actually put your body into almost a menopausal state. Birth control definitely affects your hormones. Most people already know that. But a really great resource I would encourage you to read is Beyond the Pill. It's a book that I read a while back. All right, so how does neurodivergence weigh into our hormones? ADHD and autism are both sensitivity conditions. We are more sensitive to lights, sounds, taste, touch. Can be really sensitive to touch, temperature changes. We can also be really sensitive to the moods and feelings of those around us, or even the intentions of those around us. So it's no wonder that our hormone fluctuations can be felt a lot more strongly than for neurotypical people. These fluctuations happen throughout the month with your cycle. They happen really strongly through adolescence, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause. Trying to help yourself balance these so that you don't have to experience these fluctuations so strongly is really key. And a lot of that has to do with the connection between your hormones, your diet, neurotransmitters, exercise, and how all of these different things affect you specifically. All right, real quick, I want to go over your menstrual cycle and the different phases that happen with that. Then we'll go over tracking as well as symptom tracking and how that could benefit you. And finally, a little bit about PMDD. So you have 4 phases in your menstrual cycle. The very first phase is your menstrual phase. When you're bleeding, it's between 1 and 7 days long. Then you move on to your follicular phase, where your body's getting ready for ovulation. Finally is ovulation, which only lasts about 24 hours. However, your body is fertile for a bit longer than that, about 5 to 7 days, because sperm can live in your reproductive system for about 3 to 5 days. And then finally, we get into the luteal phase, which will then be the last week or so before you have your period. So as far as your hormones are concerned, during menstruation, your hormones are pretty low. They're pretty not doing much at all. In the follicular phase, you will start to see your estrogen rising. So that means you're going to get more energy. You're going to have more focus. You're typically just going to feel better in general. This is also when testosterone starts to rise as well. So it's no wonder that we can feel very great after we finish bleeding and before we hit ovulation. The peak of both your testosterone and estrogen are at ovulation, and after that they start to fall back down. And as they're falling back down, that's when progesterone starts to rise, which can make us feel more calm, but it can also make us feel kind of sleepy, kind of sluggish, and a lot of people feel pretty terrible, especially if they have PMDD during their luteal phase, especially considering that both testosterone and estrogen are dropping. So when we think about tracking your cycle, knowing what to expect based on your hormone fluctuations and symptom tracking, it can be really useful to do this so that you can see what patterns may emerge so that you can support yourself better. I got a lot of this information from Her Mood Mentor, which you can find the video down below. And if you look in the description of that video, there is a printout that you can use for symptom mapping. Essentially, symptom mapping is like picking some of the typically more negative, but maybe some of the positive symptoms that you feel throughout your cycle, such as anxiety or depression, headaches, cramps, your energy levels, and record at the end of each day how you feel, what the severity of these symptoms are, so that after about 3 months, you may be able to pick up some patterns. You can also include when you started certain medications or supplements or started exercising or something like that to see how that affects you as well. One other important thing I would mention right here is that it's important also to track when you have major lifestyle changes, like if you lost your job, if you had a big fight with your friend, if you were moving or you got really sick. It's important to record these too, because the follicular growth of your egg can be impacted 3 months after an issue, like a big stressful situation happens to you, or just a big event like moving. So something that happens to you right now, you may see show up in your cycle 3 months from now. I'm just going to hit on PMDD real quick. If you have more questions or want to do more research on that, I would check out the Her Mood Mentor video below, because she goes all over that. she goes over all that. And PMDD is like a very, very severe PMS symptoms, just so severe that they impact you for 14 or more days out of your cycle, out of the month, that you feel awful. Maybe you feel sad, depressed, enraged, you have no energy at all, so little energy that you can't even get out of the house or do anything at all. PMDD is just something that really highly affects women who are neurodivergent, and so I wanted to mention it here, but I wasn't going to give a whole lot of information about it. All right, strap in. We're going to talk about men's hormones, and particularly related to neurodivergence, and if they have any kind of a cycle or what happens to them as they age. So men basically just have one hormone. They have their testosterone, right? And what happens to them is they sleep, and as they're sleeping, the testosterone builds up in their system. They wake up in the morning and the testosterone is at its peak. And then throughout the day, it starts to kind of gradually lower down and down and down until bedtime at night, and then they go back to sleep. And that's it. That's every day for them. And I'm like, there's no monthly cycle. It's just a daily cycle. But starting at about age 30, men start declining in the amount of testosterone that produces each day in their body by about 1 to 2% per year. And typically men will start to notice this decline more around age 40 or 50. So what does this have to do with neurodivergent men? What happens to them? How do they feel different? So men with autism, like my husband, typically have more testosterone than the average male. Lucky him. But men with ADHD, when their testosterone starts to decline as they get older, they can experience it more strongly, which can lead to more emotional dysregulation as well as irritability. I'm really excited to get into diet, and I have some really great and exciting solutions and things that I found out when I was doing some research for this video this time. So if you like this video so far, please hit the like button, share it with somebody who may be struggling with any of these issues. And if you like getting more content geared toward neurodivergent parenting or being a neurodivergent woman, then you can subscribe to my channel. So what are diet's effects on our hormones as well as our brain and neurotransmitters? We're going to talk about nutrient deficiencies and what you can do besides just taking vitamins or supplements, alcohol's effect on our neurodivergent brains, and some general information on what medication does to us based on a lot of the common medications that we would take as neurodivergent people. So let's talk about bread. We all know that bread is bad for us, pasta. But what if I told you that you could be eating bread every day, and you should, and it would be actually giving you more vitamins and minerals that your body can naturally absorb and use? This just comes from fresh milled flour. Don't turn me off yet. Okay, I myself have made bread from fresh milled flour, and I have autism and ADHD in a family. Okay, it's not like I'm not busy. But let me just give you a very tiny little backstory, because this is how people ate bread 150 years ago. Now, the flour that we eat is only a third of what comes from the wheat berry when it's milled. So we actually lose out on three really important things. The first one is iron. Iron produces and it regulates dopamine. Low iron can mean that you can get anemia, weakness, and tiredness. I struggle with borderline low iron, and I can tell a couple days out of my cycle every month when my body needs more iron, and I literally can't give it enough iron from the normal food that I eat and the supplements that I try to give myself to raise my iron levels. The second big thing that we have lost from our bread that's in freshly milled flour is vitamin B1 or thiamine. If you don't have enough of this, it can lead to memory loss, irritability, and depression. The third one is vitamin B3 or niacin. This is another big one because if you don't have enough of this, it will lead to dermatitis or skin issues, GI tract issues, mental illness, and dementia. So when they replaced the fresh milled flour that they used to use 150 years ago with the single third ingredient of it nowadays, and they figured out that all of these deficiencies were popping up, they replaced those three things with synthetic things, which, as you can imagine, are not going to fix the problem. If you struggle with any of these issues, then I might do a video in the future about how I make my own bread. It doesn't mean you have to eat all of your bread this way or all of your pasta, but just supplementing some of it will help get a lot of those vitamins back into your system in a way that's so much easier to digest and use by your body. Another thing to note is if you have gotten a blood panel, which I would strongly recommend, and you're looking at your vitamins and you're looking at your minerals and whether or not you are low or deficient, and you're kind of on the low end, but you're not past the low end where they'd say, oh, you're in trouble here. The fact is that if you're in the part where it says that you're in trouble here, then that is like a diseased state. That is like you are really sick. So if you are on the low end of some of these vitamins and minerals, it's no wonder why you might feel like garbage. And you should really try to raise those up. Now, this next one is really controversial, so don't throw a book at me. But another way that you can get vitamins, enzymes, omega-3s into your system is by drinking raw milk. But I will say you have to be really careful where you source your raw milk from. If you go to the rawmilkinstitute.org, you will see that there are two different types of farms. There is the dairy farm where they're going to pasteurize the milk anyway. And so everything's kind of dirty and gross. It doesn't matter because they're going to cook the snot out of the milk anyway. But if you go to a raw milk farm, they should be very, very clean, very meticulous. They should be testing all of their cows regularly to make sure that they are all healthy. All right, let's move on before you turn off the video. Let's talk about alcohol real quick and how it affects our brains as neurodivergent women. So the article that I found talked about how alcohol disrupts your prefrontal cortex. which is an area that those of us with ADHD already struggle with. And I would argue that if you have autism, you probably struggle as well in that area. They just didn't mention autism in the article because I don't think they were studying that particular condition. Drinking alcohol can cause really intensified emotional dysregulation, which does get worse the older that you get. And also the day after you drink alcohol, for women, it can make you feel more anxiety, more depression, and it can also make your stimulants not as effective. This is a lot of the reasons why I've heard of a lot of neurodivergent women stop or quit drinking alcohol altogether. Let's move on to some of the common medications that us neurodivergent ladies take and what effect it can have on our nutrients. So for stimulants, there's basically two, right? There's amphetamines and then there's methylphenidates. Methylphenidate is stuff like Ritalin or Concerta. So when you take these, you maybe notice it decreases your appetite, which means you are eating less and it raises your heart rate. So you're using more. But aside from that, aside from not necessarily eating and consuming enough nutrition, it also has long-term effects on your nutrition, and it will actually cause you to become more deficient in a lot of things. Potassium, iron, magnesium, B vitamins, and it could also give you issues with proteins and lipids and kind of like mess up your antioxidants. So your amphetamines are things like Adderall or Vyvanse. Again, it suppresses your appetite, raises your heart rate, but it's also over long term going to deplete your body of omega-3s, potassium, magnesium, B12, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. And a lot of the ones that I mentioned for both of those, like iron, for example, that helps with dopamine creation. So literally the thing that you're taking to help boost your dopamine, your serotonin levels so that you can focus is in the long run going to lower those levels. So my psychiatrist said, no, that doesn't happen at all. But all of the research I've done on these peer-reviewed science-based articles has shown otherwise. So my point is here that just watch out for yourself. Make sure to add in these vitamins. Eat your food like it's medicine so that you can keep yourself balanced. Let's do some SSRIs, things that we would likely take for anxiety or depression. This is a general overview of what happens if you take SSRIs, your particular medications that you take. You should do your own research. It's not too difficult to find stuff on Google that's actually scientific information. But again, we see nutrient depletions happening, like magnesium, which helps with energy and muscle function. Vitamin D, potassium, and calcium, as well as zinc, which helps with neurotransmitter production. It can affect your gut microbiome, and long-term use of it can also affect your bone density. The next one is pregnancy. So as of today, while I film this video, I am 15 weeks pregnant, which puts me in my second trimester, thank God. And as a neurodivergent woman who's going through perimenopause, I wanted to do more research on the hormonal changes that are happening so that I can plan ahead to support myself post-pregnancy as well. So hopefully this will help you as well if you're pregnant or maybe you know somebody who is pregnant. So what happens to your hormones during pregnancy? So essentially starting around 14 weeks or so, your progesterone and your estrogen start to rise pretty quickly. And they rise and rise and rise and rise until you give birth. So you get to enjoy this energy, this focus, this lessened anxiety throughout your pregnancy. At least I have after the first trimester, because that always sucks. And then also testosterone rises gradually higher than the typical levels that you would see if you were not pregnant. You don't have a huge bump in testosterone, but it does rise. So no wonder a lot of women start to feel really good in their second trimester. After birth, what happens? All your progesterone, your estrogen, and your testosterone, they crash back down to pre-pregnancy levels within 1 to 5 days after birth. Woohoo, yay! And I love how they call this time baby blues. No. Depression is not baby blues. This is when you feel like, all right, so after birth, great, everything crashes. What if you're breastfeeding? Breastfeeding kind of staves off your period. So it kind of keeps your progesterone low. And if you're not getting your period, then your estrogen is not really doing anything either. Your testosterone is not doing anything. The only thing that you have to lean on is oxytocin because of the breastfeeding and the skin-to-skin contact. Also, your thyroid can become unstable during this time, which is why some women have a lot of issues several months after giving birth. And your cortisol is typically going to be nice and high because your body is under stress. You're not sleeping well. All these other things that happen with birth. This is a great time to lean into those nutrition boosts that will help with some of the serotonin and the dopamine production and help keep your body supported and more balanced. It's possible after birth that medication like an antidepressant started pretty quickly, or even hormone replacement therapy can really help you feel a lot better, a lot faster, especially if you're neurodivergent, or especially if you typically do deal with a lot of these mental and hormonal shifts that are just really hard on you right after birth. So what if you're not breastfeeding? Basically, your ovulation, your cycle can return to normal. So you might be ovulating within 4 to 6 weeks after birth. So your oxytocin will be dropping quickly, but your progesterone and estrogen will be kind of getting back to normal levels. Those should be back to normal levels in like 3 to 6 months after birth. Let's move on to the last one, perimenopause. Perimenopause is a beast. They've done so much research about this, and I still feel like I don't know that much. But I'm going to tell you what I do know, and hopefully some of this will help you. We're going to go over the different hormone shifts that happen and what they mean. All of this, how it relates to neurodivergent women, typical answers or solutions that doctors will give you, and then finally, like how you can test your own hormones at home, which is something I did. I do have some really great and surprising research on this, so try to listen to the end. Yes, you probably know when you enter perimenopause, your hormones can fluctuate daily. Your estrogen, your progesterone, they can be all over the place, up and down, testosterone. And they are like slowly declining over time, but especially at the beginning of perimenopause, what I've noticed is that they're just all over the place. And from day to day, you don't know really what to expect. And you can be tracking your cycle and still have a regular cycle, but still have these hormone fluctuations that are like out of control, which will provide you with the symptoms of perimenopause that we love so much. So if you're feeling those night sweats, or that really intense brain fog, or just chronic fatigue, your histamines are really, really high, low libido, overwhelm, the list goes on, itchy feet, dry nose, I don't know. But if you're experiencing typical perimenopause and other symptoms, then even if your cycle's regular, you probably have perimenopause. So for us, neurodivergent women, these hormone fluctuations turn us into these insane, wild, small children. So specifically for us neurodivergent women though, our estrogen helps produce dopamine, right? And that's something that we already struggle with. So if our estrogen is dropping, we're going to have even worse symptoms of brain fog, worse sleep, less energy, even heightened sensory sensitivities, heightened autistic burnout, emotional instability, obviously. And a lot of the coping mechanisms that we may have used until this point in our lives tend to not really work. Your stimulants might not even work, even if you do have medication that you're taking. And that's why a lot of us women, as we entered perimenopause, found out we were neurodivergent. So we know all the crappy stuff that's going on. What can we do to resolve it? Doctors typically have a lot of the same responses to this. And if you're like me, I was 37 or so, or maybe if you were even younger when you started perimenopause, you might get just dismissed because they say you're just too young to start anyway. The ways that you can support yourself, aside from doctors, which we'll get to, is by watching your nutrition, slowing down, resting, learning more about neurodivergence. You can also buy a hormone test kit that you can use at home called Mira. I did this. It's about $200. You can pee on this thing every day if you want to just kind of get an idea of where your hormones are at, or if your hormones are fluctuating. And this is information that you could take to your doctor if they won't help you, to show them that your hormones are indeed fluctuating. You could also just get another doctor. So your doctor may prescribe you hormone replacement therapy. Estrogen is a really big one. A lot of women are prescribed estrogen. Some women are also prescribed testosterone. In a lot of cases, progesterone can really help as well. Really, all three of these, in a lot of cases, it needs to be tweaked. Your doctor may tweak it. Some of them might not want to prescribe you one of these, like progesterone. They might say it's not going to help you, or they, whatever reason they come up with. But there was a really interesting podcast episode that I will put down in the description that goes over specifically progesterone and its impact on neurodivergent women who took that hormone, and it was actually an actual study that they did. If you skip the pregnancy section, I am 15 weeks along pregnant. And this is only interesting here because my hormones, I'm getting a lot more progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, and I actually feel like a normal human being right now. I don't feel like a wild, crazed maniac. I feel energetic. My depression is low. My anxiety is practically not there. Ironically, my moods are a lot more stable, at least right now. And this tells me that something like hormone replacement therapy may really benefit me post-pregnancy. I've heard of a lot of women that really benefit from hormone replacement therapy, but I've also heard of a lot of women that tried it and it really didn't help. So I think a lot of it is just not knowing how your body's going to react and having to invest all this time and energy and money into something that you're not even sure if it's going to work. Another typical doctor fix is prescribing you birth control. Birth control, it may be helpful for some women. It is a synthetic hormone, though. A lot of women can also be prescribed medications such as a stimulant that will help, especially if you have ADHD. So if you have ADHD and autism, you take a stimulant. I've heard a lot of other people, and I've experienced this as well, say that it can heighten the negative symptoms of your autism. It's very frustrating because really, then is there any hope for you? Is there any hope for me? I don't know. That's why I think that kind of like brings me back around to nutrition and trying to support yourself with food, but also maybe with hormone replacements. And we have the SSRIs, a medication that could help with anxiety and depression, especially during perimenopause. But you do need to watch out for those nutrient deficiencies that I mentioned earlier of long-term use, and putting yourself into these nutrient depleted states can make your perimenopause symptoms worse again. So you really have to watch and not really expect your doctor to explain all of this to you and to help you through that whole process. So my point here is, if you're in a really fragile state already, if you're in perimenopause or you're in burnout or both, and you're finding out that you're also neurodivergent and you're trying different medications, you really need to support yourself. You really need to watch your nutrition, slow down, rest. It's not going to be like this forever. But in order to get yourself into a place that's a little bit more of a firm foundation, you just have to be really careful what medications are doing to you. All right, so what do we do with all this information? I'm a big believer that we forget to remember things. We want to take care of ourselves. We want to learn how to do it and support ourselves, but then sometimes we forget to remember to do it. I've been wanting to do this thing where I make this big board up, like a board that I can write on and stick it on my bedroom wall, called like a mind board or something, and put on it things that I should do, that I want to do, but I just forget to remember to do them for myself. Or maybe I do them for like a little while and I totally forget about them again. Things that I would put on this board would be stuff like a dopamine menu, so that if I'm really struggling and I don't even know what to do, I can like look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I'd love to listen to this song on my headphones. It makes me feel really good. I can put on the board quotes that help me to have more compassion for myself. Reminders to take 10-minute breaks where I'm not looking at anything. I'm just resting so that I can kind of recollect my thoughts and check in with myself. A list of amazing character traits that I have or goals that I've accomplished, so I can remember how great I am and how many things I can still accomplish in the future that I want to. I might even include a vision board or a goal board on there of things that I want to accomplish this year. So keep an eye out. If I actually get around to doing that, then I will probably make a video about it as well. But my point here is, I want you to feel more balanced. I want you to be able to support yourself. Instead of just walking away from this video, choose one thing to do for yourself today and write it down in the comments below. I hope this video was super helpful. I just love learning about this really nerdy, sciencey stuff and how everything connects, because if you don't know, then you don't know, and how can you help yourself? So I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye.